pleasant day to everyone. Today we will be discussing all about Eastern beliefs and ancient interpretations of the origins and elements of the universe. We will start off the discussion with ancient Chinese beliefs, followed by a segment about Japanese beliefs, and to cap off this discussion, we will also be highlighting some key aspects of Middle Eastern beliefs. The ancient Chinese word for cosmos is Yuzhou, which is made of two characters, Yu meaning space and Zhou meaning time. Yu here describes the four cardinal directions as well as up and down, while time involves the past, the present, dawn, and dusk. Combined together, Yuzhou describes their concept of the cosmos, which is the movement of things passing through a certain space and time. Taoist philosophers believed that all things in the universe had natural origins generated from Yo, or a state of existence or being, and Wu, or a state of nothingness. The universe then progressed based on four great principles. The first great principle is called Tai Yi, or change. Some scholars also believe that Tai Yi is actually a god representing unity, a unity between Yin, or the energy of darkness and discord, and Yang, or the energy of light and order. Out of Tai Yi came Tai Chu, or the origin. This is the first instance where Qi, a vital life force of all entities, manifested in reality. Take note that Qi at this point in time did not have any form or any substance at all. After Tai Chu came Tai Shi, also dubbed as the beginning. This is the beginning where Qi takes on shape. This shape is also referred to as the form and is bestowed by Yang. Lastly, after Tai Shi came Tai Su, or the primordial undifferentiatedness. This is where Qi, which now had form or shape, is also bestowed with substance. Therefore, because Qi now has form and substance, matter was formed. According to the doctrine of the Shujiao, all worlds in the universe experience four stages. The first stage is creation, or Chen, followed by a state of existence, or Zu, then destruction of the world, or Huai, and lastly, a calm emptiness, or Kong. It is said that each cycle lasts for 1.3 billion years, and each great cycle lasts for 80 cycles, or roughly 80 billion years. There were three main ancient theories as to what the structure of the universe is. The first theory is called Gai Tan Shuo, or hemispherical dome, where the earth is within heaven and heaven acts as a lid over the earth. The second theory is called Hun Qian Shou, or celestial sphere, wherein the earth floats on the water that heaven contains. The last theory in ancient China was called Suan Ye Shuo, or empty space. This describes heavenly bodies that are just highly dense vapors floating freely in empty space. When talking about the origin of the universe, it is important to note that there was an abundance of cosmogonic myths in ancient China. These myths pertain to stories related to the creation of the world and the universe. They are attempts to explain and make sense of the boundless universe. One of the most notable creation myths in ancient China tells the story of a being called Pangu. In the beginning, there was darkness everywhere and chaos ruled. Within this darkness, an egg suddenly formed and yin and yang were scrambled inside of it. In this, the interactions caused the formation of a being called Pangu, who slept and grew inside of the egg for 18,000 years. It is notable to mention then that the shape of the egg is actually very reminiscent of Einstein's curved space theory. After Pangu wakes up, two versions arise from the myths. The first version states that as Pangu realized that he was trapped inside the egg, he conjured a giant axe and broke the egg open. The second version states that As Pangu woke up, he stretched his limbs outwards, smashing open the egg. In both versions, it is important to note that the smashing of the egg is also very reminiscent of our modern-day Big Bang theory. The components of the egg also corresponded with the components of the universe. The egg white referred to the heavens, or the yang component, while the turbid and dense egg yolk referred to the earth, or the yin component. Pangu stood in between of the components to separate them, where he grew at a speed of 10 feet per day for 18,000 years. This also corresponds to the size and age of the universe according to ancient Chinese belief. After growing, Pangu grew exhausted, so he slept and never woke up again. Eventually, his body formed the components of the universe, or the aspects of the physical reality that we know today. Now we move on to the segment highlighting how elements of the universe were conceived in ancient China. Wusing, or the 5 elements, pertain to the 5 fundamental elements of the universe according to ancient Chinese scholars. These elements are wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. It is said that different types of energy are in a state of constant interaction with one another. And the Wusing is also used by many traditional Chinese fields to explain different phenomena, like in astronomy or even in Chinese medicine. It is said that each element has its own characteristics and associations with different aspects of nature. Therefore, if you change or manipulate only one element in a particular system in nature, this will cause a massive change in outcome or behavior of that system. This coincides with the Eastern belief that all elements or all parts of the universe are in constant interaction with one another. To demonstrate, we will be giving examples in feng shui, astrology, and in medicine. First, let's talk about associations in feng shui. Feng shui is a traditional form of Chinese geomancy, which attempts to harmonize the energy forces by altering physical conditions and physical arrangements in a given location. This applies to households, to offices, or other physical environments. For directional correspondences, the east corresponds to wood, south with fire, center with earth, west to metal, and north with water. For seasons, spring is associated with wood, summer with fire, the intermediate season is earth, autumn with metal, and winter with water. For climate associations, wood corresponds to windy, fire corresponds to hot, earth to damp, metal to dry, and water to cold. For color, wood is said to be green, fire is red, earth is yellow, metal is white, and water is black. And lastly, for shape, wood is associated with rectangles, fire with angular shapes, earth with square, metals with round shapes, and water with undulating or irregular shapes. Now let's move on to astrological associations. Astrology was also a significant part of ancient Chinese belief. It was believed that the heavenly bodies and interactions in space could affect the physical reality on the Earth. So for the planets, wood was associated with Venus, fire with Jupiter, earth with Mercury, metal with Mars, and water with Saturn. Next, for heavenly creatures. These heavenly creatures took part in a lot of the creation myths and in a lot of the legends in ancient Chinese belief. Wood was associated with the azure dragon, fire with the vermilion bird, earth with the yellow dragon, metal with the white tiger, and water with the black tortoise. For virtue, these elements were also corresponding with certain virtues or certain aspects of behavior. So benevolence was attributed to wood, propriety was attributed to fire, fidelity or honesty was attributed to earth, righteousness to metal, and wisdom to water. Likewise, emotions were also corresponded to these elements. Anger was correspondent to wood, joy to fire, worry to earth, grief to metal, and fear to water. So if individuals, for instance, wanted to change a certain aspect in their life, let's say they wanted more joy in their life, they would likely use more fire elements in their practice and in their lifestyle. Lastly, let's take a look at Chinese medicine associations. So again, ancient Chinese scholars, or in this case, doctors, believed that all elements had qi flowing in them. Chinese medicine aims to diagnose illnesses based on the abundance or excess of qi or the lack of qi. And these things can be diagnosed because of the correspondences with the 5 elements. For human organs, the liver corresponds to wood, the heart corresponds to fire, the spleen to earth, the lungs to metal, and the kidney to water. The sense organs are also correspondent to these elements. The eye corresponds to wood, the tongue corresponds to fire, the mouth corresponds to earth, and the nose corresponds to metal, and the ear corresponds to water. Now for taste, sour corresponds to wood, bitter corresponds to fire, sweet corresponds to earth, spicy corresponds to metal, and salty corresponds to water. So for example, if a patient has a lacking bitter taste, it might mean that they lack the qi in the heart. Therefore, a fire-based treatment would be recommended. This is the kind of application that the 5 elements have in interactions in different aspects of Chinese belief. In terms of interactions, the Wu Xing states that the world changes according to generation or overcoming of these 5 elements. These two are complementary. In other words, they are the yin and yang of the Wu Xing. Processes promote development, while overcoming processes control development. By promoting and restraining, systems are actually harmonized and balance is maintained. This concept of balance is omnipresent again in ancient Chinese and Eastern beliefs, and it is one of the core tenets as to how they perceived reality and the universe.
Japan is known to have one of the most intricate and well-preserved cultures in the world. Deeply embedded in their culture are belief systems and myths, including one on the creation of the universe. Described firsthand in Kojiki, the oldest record written in Japan dating back to the year 712, and Nihon Shoki, written back in 720, Japanese mythology includes detailed stories of how the universe came to be. Like many other civilizations, Japanese mythology includes a long list of deities believed to have power over human beings. These deities are woven into the very story of how the universe began and why the world is as it is today. The Japanese creation myth begins with a lifeless, silent universe wrapped in chaos. Change came when matter or particles began rising, making sound as they moved. Those that were able to move to the top of the universe became light. Beneath those light formed heaven, and those that remained below formed the earth. From this arose 3 deities, Ameno-Mini-Kannushi, Takami-Musuhi, and Kami-Musuhi. 2 spirits also emerged, the active and passive essences, said to be the ancestor of all things. Together, they would initiate the creation of what we have today. The 3 primordial deities created a series of gods which led to the creation of the world. These gods were called the 7 generations of the Age of Gods. Information on these generations are limited, except for the last generation, which was composed of Izanagi and Izanami, who were responsible for the creation of the islands of Japan. Scholars believe that each generation is responsible for a specific time frame during the creation of the universe. However, due to the lack of mentions in Japanese mythological accounts, knowledge of the first 2 generations of gods, Kuni no Tokotachi and Toyokumono, were lacking. However, For the succeeding generations, scholars have derived some sort of representation based on a few facts. The third generation, Uhijini and Suhijini, were believed by scholars to represent the stage of creation when the earth was not yet firm and solid, only existing of sand and mud mixed with water, due to Chinese characters in their name that represent sand and mud. The fourth generation, Tsunoguchi and Ikoguchi, which have characters representing horns and life in their names, were believed by scholars to represent the stage of creation when life could be sustained on earth. The fifth generation, Ohotonoji and Ohotonobe, were thought of by scholars to represent the creation of sexuality, due to the presence of characters in their names that signify masculinity and femininity. The sixth generation, Omodaru and Ayakishikone, were believed by scholars to have names that signify completeness, likely to represent the completeness of the earth and or the beings that live on it. The last generation, Izanami and Izanagi, were well known as the gods that created the islands of Japan. Izanagi plunged the spear into the sea of filmy fog floating in the air, and when he withdrew the spear, the mud that dripped from the weapon became an island, Japan. Satisfied, they descended to the earth. Afterwards, numerous events occurred in Japanese mythology. Other deities or gods were born from Izanami and Izanagi. These gods represent many things, such as the minor islands of Japan, seas and rivers, and other physical objects we see today. Last to be born to the couple deities was Kagutsuchi, the fire god. Upon birth, he severely burned her mother Izanami, causing her death. Izanagi's tears were then said to have birthed to other deities. Many other gods and deities followed, each representing different aspects in the lives of the Japanese people. Japanese cosmology insists that there are 5 elements in the universe that they call the Godai or the Great Five. They are rooted from the belief systems in China and India. These are Ji, Sui, Ka, Fu, and Ku that can be represented through a 3-dimensional geometric stack called the Gorinto. The Japanese also associated the Godai with human personalities, each with their own interpretation as to where they are placed in the Gorinto, which is formed with a cube as the base, a sphere above it, then a crescent, and topped with a lotus flower. These elements explain what constitutes the real world, such as the nature of objects, persons, actions, and communities. Aside from philosophy, the Godai also describes the structure of the universe. Ji pertains to Earth and is represented by the square in the Gorinto. It is believed to be the most fundamental element, which is why it can be noticed that in the figure, it serves as the base supporting all the other elements. The Earth also stimulates all the 5 human senses. Ji is also considered inert and inanimate. It does not act on its own and needs another element to interact with it. When translated into human personality, Ji is stubborn but dependable. Hence, it is a good base for all the other elements. Above Ji is Sui. Sui constitutes water and is portrayed by a circle. In contrast to Ji, Sui is flowing and ever-changing, which associates it to flexibility, emotion, and adaptability of the human personality. It depicts the variability of emotions as well. It is also believed that plants have intermediary qualities of earth and water. They grow on the boundary between the 2 elements, moving and reaching for light while staying anchored on the ground. Sui holds everything together. The next element is Ka, which means fire. It is represented by an upright pyramid that resembles a flame. It signifies the motivating energy that lifts, animates, and even destroys. Ka is associated with life and our motivation, passion, and drive to do the things that we humans ought to do. Above Ka is Fu, which is a denotation of wind. It can be found on top of the pyramid as a crescent-shaped object. It represents freedom in action. For humans, it symbolizes the agility of the mind and its creativity. In order to achieve its purpose, Fu needs to interact with the other elements, thus allowing the blazing of fire and the falling of rain. Fu generally means movement, breath, and spirit. The last element is Ku. It sits atop all the other elements, emphasizing its power. It seems to take the shape of both water and fire, but is commonly seen as the lotus flower that holds the jewel of enlightenment in its center. Ku is believed to be the source of all creativity in the world. Ku also represents the void in the universe. It portrays nothing, absence, emptiness, death, the unknown, those beyond human thought. It is the origin of humans, where we came from nothing, we knew nothing, and we had nothing. We were nothing. And together, they stitch the universe as one to explain its very nature and philosophy.
Middle East was the site of some of the world's earliest civilizations and the birthplace of the three great religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Characterized with diverse beliefs and traditions, the Middle East shares different views on the formation of the universe. The formation of the universe resulted from the injecting order of the cosmos into the chaotic primordial beings or matter, followed by divine acts of creation. Now in Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 to 3 says that when God began to create the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and from darkness there was light. God's evoking light is the first act of creation. Meanwhile, it conveys that darkness or evil was pre-existent. Deep is the same as the primordial dragon called Tiamat in the Babylonian epic of creation, and ancient Middle Eastern beliefs include that God is not responsible for the forces of evil which were there before he embarked on the creative process. After evoking light, it is believed that God separated the water containing the earth from the water containing the heaven, confined the earth's waters to the bodies of water, created heavenly bodies, plants, animals, and finally man, who is to rule over the earth. All of this takes 6 days, after which God rests on the seventh, so that the Sabbath crowns the epic of creation and imposes the obligation to observe the Sabbath in keeping the principle of Imitatio Dei, or the imitation of God. Now, Enuma Elish, also known as the Seven Tablets of Creation, is a Babylonian creation epic which states that first, there existed only the male Apsu and the female Tiamat, which were gods of the deep. They raised a family of gods that were so unruly that Apsu resolved to destroy them. But Ea, one of the younger gods, heard of Apsu's plans and struck him down first. This began a war among gods. Tiamat was furious that her mate was killed, and she began producing great and ferocious monsters to slay Ea and his brothers. On the other hand, Ea and the goddess Damkina created the great god Marduk. Rebellion and chaos followed. Tiamat, who had embarked on a course of destruction, was slain by Marduk. Marduk raised half of her body to the heavens to form the sky, and the other half to form the earth. From the epic, we could derive the beliefs of the formation of elements of the ancient Middle East. Water was the first element in the Babylonian culture, which was represented by Apsu, the sweet water, and Tiamat, the salt water. Earth was created from the carcass of Tiamat, after which she was slain by Marduk. The sun or fire was created after Ea and the goddess Damkina when they created Marduk. His eyes flashed with lightning, and when he spoke, he breathed fire. He was furious and raging. He was also called the Great Sun. Finally, the formation of the wind is associated with Marduk, who was also able to control the four winds to clear a path to Tiamat. He also cast a hurricane into her mouth before he let one of his arrows fly and cut her nearly in half. Islamic beliefs also make up the Middle Eastern beliefs on the formation of the universe. The Big Bang was not mentioned in the Quran. Instead, it stated that the heavens and the earth were joined together as one unit before we clove them asunder. Turned to the sky, and had been smoke. He said to it and to the earth, "Come together willingly or unwillingly," they said. "We come together in willing obedience." This passage generalizes everything: elements, matter, and natural law as the creation of Allah. The sun, the moon, and the planets were created by Allah as well. It is He who created the night and the day, and the sun and the moon. All swim along in its rounded course. The Quran places the span of creation within the length of 6 days, also acknowledging the ambiguity of the length of a day. One is that the extent of the day is 50,000 years, and secondly, a day in the sight of the Lord is like 1,000 years of your reckoning. religion also has been significant to astronomy. In fact, many Islamic scholars have contributed to the study of the sun, stars, planets, and other celestial bodies. Scientific procedures are necessary for religious rituals. Early Muslim scientists believed that religion and science go hand in hand, and that the Quran holds significant teachings of nature as well as natural phenomena. Arabs have always been knowledgeable about the stars and used them to navigate deserts. But Islam raised the stakes for astronomy. The requirement that Muslims face in the direction of Mecca when they pray required knowledge of the size and shape of the earth. The best astronomical minds of the Muslim would tackle the job of producing tables or diagrams by which the Qibla or the sacred directions could be found from any point in the Islamic world. Their use of astronomical instruments like the astrolabe, the ephemeris, the dust board leads to their prominence of astrology. Now, astrology seeks to predict the influence of the heavenly bodies on Earth, relying on the understanding of the movement of the planets and the ability to calculate their positions in the future. In this way, astrology was considered a branch of astronomy. Astrology in medieval Islam were rooted in Arabian, Persian, Babylonian, and even Hellenistic and Indian traditions. It has also established a magnificent observatory and a library of astronomical and astrological texts at Baghdad in the 8th century. Moreover, they offered services in bazaars where anyone could pay for horoscopes, readings, and predictions. They were also employed at royal courts to help rulers decide such matters as when to announce an heir or launch a military campaign, or even to predict future state of their kingdoms.
These Eastern beliefs are not considered scientific theories because there is little to no scientific evidence behind them. These are superstitions that sprouted from the culture's faiths on supernatural entities. Theories have certain essential criteria to be classified as one. It must make falsifiable or testable predictions. It must be tentative and can be revised as needed. It must be well supported by many independent strands of evidence. It must agree with other previous experimental results. The origins of the elements, as well as the universe as suggested by the Japanese, Chinese, and Middle Eastern cultures, do not agree with existing scientific theories and observations. In other words, empirical information does not support the creation of myths proposed by the aforementioned ancient Eastern civilizations. Furthermore, their ideologies cannot serve as reliable foundations or basis to explain and to predict most of nature's phenomena without resorting to religious and philosophical arguments. These beliefs are not considered scientific theories on the grounds that they do not stem from natural law, rather from supernatural intervention, which is beyond scientific explanation.
Regardless, though these beliefs may not be scientific, they have served as an effective framework for thousands and thousands of years for humanity to understand the world around them. And with this, we hope that it has helped you understand the world around you.